discuss that, to discuss the geopolitical implications and its impact on the oil prices. I'm now joined by Firas Abi Ali, Senior Manager for the Middle East and North Africa at the IHS Country Risk, live from London. Thank you very much for joining us here on The Big Picture. Just tell us a little bit about the geopolitical implications, because clearly Israel was not happy with the lifting of the sanctions. We know there are, of course, intense rivalry between a Shia Iran and a Sunni Saudi Arabia. So purely from that perspective, many believe that this is going to make Iran a lot more powerful. What will be the immediate geopolitical implications that you foresee?
I think immediately it means that the Iranians can pursue the proxy wars that they're involved in the region with less concern as to the reaction of the West and with less fear as to the reaction of the West. They can afford to be more assertive in the Persian Gulf. We will also expect to see them over time trying to expand their commercial influence in the countries where they're already engaged militarily, and perhaps to even try to go beyond that and see if they can make investments in places like Jordan or Egypt that would improve their political capital within the Sunni Arab world.
Right. Because there were also some concerns, Mr. Ali, even among the Gulf countries, even though openly they said that they were in support of the lifting of the sanctions, but privately, there were many media reports coming out from there. Their concern really was that at a time when America is becoming increasingly energy independent, will America play a lesser role in the Middle East? So in that sense, there was a lot of concern. So purely in terms of America's role in the Middle East, and as far as this development is concerned, how do you see it?
I mean, President Obama has already expressed that his administration intends to pivot away from the Middle East. If you listen to some of the candidates we're looking at for the presidential elections, some of them advocate a less interventionist policy on the back of U.S. exhaustion. What this means is that Gulf states will continue to increase their arms purchases as they try to secure themselves against the giants that are next door, both Iran and Saudi Arabia. Longer term, the party that is most hurt by any decline in the importance of oil will be Saudi Arabia, but I think that we are still some way off from seeing that.
Right. I mean, especially, in the context of the sort of strategy we've seen Saudi Arabia adopting in looking to gain market share, in the context of Iran also now entering the market, do you see any sort of reassessment on the part of Saudi Arabia, or do you feel that this strategy that they've already been employing over the last year or so is only going to intensify now?
I don't think that they really have a choice in the matter. If they end up reducing their supply, it's doubtful that other states will follow suit. So they don't really have an incentive to surrender market share at this stage. In addition, they're probably betting that they can outspend the Iranians and the Russians in the proxy wars in Syria and in Iraq. What we need to remember is that the policy of dropping oil prices is one that comes out of desperation. It doesn't come from a position of strength. And I don't think that enough has changed for Saudi Arabia to improve its regional position, to allow it to pursue a different strategy that doesn't involve hurting themselves in the hope that their rivals will be even more hurt by the low oil price.
Right. But would you say, Mr. Ali, that perhaps somewhere also the oil markets are overreacting, because many knew that Iran, that the sanctions will be lifted off. So in that sense, do you think there's also an element of overreaction which is then kind of sort of getting reflected in the prices that oil is trading today, which is almost at a 13-year low?
Yeah, I mean, my minor point here. My name is Abi Ali, not Ali, but
yes.
That's all right. Look,
okay.
When it comes to the correction of the prices, it might be that because the Iranians probably end up pumping closer to 400,000 barrels per day by the middle of this year, you will see a small adjustment in the price that goes a little bit upwards because of the expectation that they would pump something like 500,000 immediately, when the reality is probably going to be more along the lines of they'll pump 400,000 by the middle of this year. An extra 400,000, obviously.
Right, yes. Well, you know, the OPEC report also came out, and it said that that non-OPEC countries will bring down their overall supply. In fact, they said that the overall supply will come down by about 660,000 barrels per day, which will trigger a larger rebalancing. You know, but at the same time, they are predicting that the global demand would rise by only 1.26 million barrels per day, marking a slowdown from about 1.54 million barrels per day, which they had forecast earlier. So, you know, looking at these two forces that are at play, on one hand, we are seeing, I mean, at least the expectation is the overall supply is going to come down, but on the other hand, demand may not be as strong as one would have anticipated. From that perspective, how do you see oil prices shaping up in 2016?
Look, I'm not an expert on the maths of this. I concentrate slightly more on the geopolitics of it. But I bring up the idea that for the Saudis, the key policy that they have available to them right now is a policy of trying to drive down the price in order to extract concessions from their rivals. They are not in a position to change policies because of the lack of alternatives that they have.
Right.
So I would look for a change in the options of Saudi Arabia before looking for them to change their behavior when it comes to price. In addition, at a time when Iran's importance is increasing, the Saudis have zero interest in surrendering market share. I think it's these factors that are going to govern a price overall. But I defer to you when it comes to the exact numbers and exactly where supply and demand balance out.
Fair enough, Mr. Abi Ali. Thank you very much for joining us and really giving us the perspective, at least, you know, in terms of what, you know, in terms of how do we see, like, you know, the latest lifting of sanctions from Iran panning out in the Middle East, both from a geopolitics perspective and in terms of the oil prices. Appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV 18.